from South Africa.
Welcome back. You tuned into Inspired Afternoons with me, your host, Mariam Mia. And now we are on to our Did You Know segment. And on our Did You Know segment, we're going to be talking all about laboratories or labs. And I have with me I'm joined by Brother Muhammad Bholat, who is the director of Hamadi Labs. So first of all, I just love this name Hamadi because it has an Arabic twist to it. But in fact, it's a Sutu term. So first, let me just welcome you. Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad, and welcome to Salam Media.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for hosting me, and welcome to your listeners as well.
Shukran. So Hamadi is actually a Sutu term, and it means it's a term for house or place of blood, and that what is your lab about? I think blood and other body fluids in it, but I mean, when I think of a lab, we think of blood and blood analysis. So this is an amazing name that you have for your laboratory. And so your laboratory consists of a group of pathologists, which include clinical pathologists, virologists, histopathologists, and several other specialists. So even before we discuss labs and everything, you need to tell me, because for me, a lab is a lab is a lab. And I don't think it's a lab is a lab is a lab. So now that's what we're doing in our Did You Know segment. This is all about to educate and inform myself and all our listeners. So it's Did You Know? So tell me now, what is a clinical pathologist? What is the difference between a clinical pathologist, a virologist, a histopathologist, and then what other specialists do we find in a lab, like the laboratory technician, etc.? So you can just enlighten us on that.
All right. So Hamadi is actually pronounced Hamadi, and it is a pseudonym for place or house of blood. The brand originated 15 years ago and currently has presence across 9 provinces. It is a group of specialists, as you indicated, pathologists, virologists, histopathologists. So basically, these are various departments within a laboratory, if you want to call it like that, where histology and cytology involves the study of cells or tissues to identify various diseases such as cancer. We also have a microbiology lab. That would be a lab that grows and studies tiny organisms to identify basically which organisms are causing a specific disease. Once you've identified the specific organism that causes that disease, you can basically treat that disease by using a specific antibiotic. You then get a hematology laboratory that basically studies anemia, blood cancers, coagulation. You get a chemistry lab, and that involves a study of the chemistry in the body to determine if your organs within your body are working properly. And then you get a molecular lab, basically, which is a lab that studies the genes using polymerase chain reactions. And we study those genes by extracting it and amplifying it. And that's more relevant currently with the whole COVID pandemic, where we're using the polymerase chain reaction technology to study various genes on a swab to identify basically if an individual has COVID-19.
Mohammed, can you just expand upon this, because I think that's current and very interesting, and maybe just break it down for us in simple terms. So you say you use this polymerase test to identify and see the gene. So please, if you can just go into a little detail just to get our minds around it, my mind around it, in terms of how you actually then isolate and identify if somebody is positive.
So basically, the process is when we diagnose using a polymerase chain reaction, we test or we target 3 types of genes, and we basically extract those genes and amplify it. And it's like basically when you extract those genes, you're just looking for a virus, and that's basically the process. So when we look at COVID-19 and basically how the sample is basically taken, it's done using a swab, either a nose swab or throat swab, and what that does is it picks up your specific gene. So when that swab reaches the lab, it's basically extracted and amplified to identify whether the individual has that specific virus.
Okay, and then before we go on to the next type, the of lab you get, I just like to just ask you in terms of this, there's, I don't know, false fake news or what, but in terms of this, how accurate are these tests? Some people say, you get many false positives in there. What is the chances of somebody then getting a false positive once it's been tested? Is this a huge chance, 50%, or very, very minimal in terms of percentages, in terms of this false negatives? We know because if you test too early, it might not present itself, the virus, and you need to test in few days. But now let's go on to the false positives. What is the percentage of somebody presenting with a false positive?
Well, it's false positive are basically very rare. I wouldn't want to put a percentage to it, but it's quite rare, especially using your PCR technology. It is a very accurate technology that we use to extract and amplify the gene. So the false positives are very rare, unless there's some sort of error somewhere along the line, human error or transcription error. So false positives are quite rare.
Okay, and then now in terms of this, so there's virology, and then what does a histopathologist do?
So histopathologist basically, histology is the study of cells and tissues. So if you get a lump or bump in your body and you go to a doctor or you go to your surgeon and they basically remove that lump from your body, it's taken to a lab, and then that tissue or bump gets studied by a histopathologist to identify if there's maybe any cancers on the tissue or anything like that.
Okay, so this is the test then. Okay, so you hit there for my understanding. So this is the test that you would do if somebody is sent, they have a lump, or they're going for an autopsy, or they've found a growth, and then so when they say, okay, so they've taken this piece of your skin or sample or any growth and they send it off to the labs, so it will probably go to a histopathologist, will then identify and do in terms of that, in terms of
they would study
and test.
So they would look at so they would look at that specific tissue or lump or bump. Example would be like a lipoma, and by looking at it, they can determine whether it's cancerous or not.
Okay, so now I understand the side. I just thought that this is a lab is a lab is a lab, and you do this, but I didn't realize they are so well. I'm learning something, and you're informing me in terms of in the field, the different specialists that will undergo these type of tests. And then besides the histopathology, what other specializations you have in terms of various tests conducted?
So there's obviously a clinical pathologist, virologist. So virologists will look at your various viruses, such as COVID-19. Clinical pathologist is basically hematology and chemistry. So chemistry is looking at the specific organs. It's a study of the chemistry in the body, determine if the body's organs are basically working properly. And hematology is basically looking at anemia and blood cancers. So that's what clinical pathologists sort of focus on. And virologists, as I indicated, it's more your virals.
Okay. And tell me something in your lab in terms of the different. I'm sure you dependent on equipment in terms of the latest technology and things like that. In terms of that, can you discuss and just educate us on some of the equipment your specialists use as well as your laboratory technicians use? What type of equipment they use?
So there's various types of equipment. You get a chemistry analyzer or machine that basically looks at all the chemistry types of bloods that will come through. You get a hematology machine. You get a machine that looks at specific hormones. Then you get, for example, virologists, you look at CD4 or viral loads, they call it, within, if an individual has HIV, they look at, so those type of equipment will study basically the viral loads and CD4 counts within a specific human body. And then within the PCRs, molecular labs, PCRs basically with COVID-19, those are specific machines that basically extract and amplify the genes. And that's more in a molecular lab.
Okay. Now moving on to, because like I said, COVID-19 is out there, especially now. I just spoke on my, yesterday I said, previously it was like, somebody who knew somebody who was tested positive. But now I think is everybody's back at the workplace, matrics and grade 7s are back at school, and we are more mobile in terms of going out for work, and that the disease has spread. And now people directly, this person is contact, or you might be even afraid you might be the tracer, so hence a need for testing. So what I'd like to know is, if you find that somebody that you probably interacted with, maybe just on a day-to-day, or even just had a brief contact with this, do you go immediately for tests, or do you wait for, what do you advise? Do we wait for 2 or 3 days, wait for the symptoms first, and then have a test? Or what do you recommend in terms of, so that you don't have a false negative?
Okay, so there's various different terminologies. You get exposure, and then you get direct contact. So if you are exposed to the virus, that would be a common exposure. So if you went to the mall, or you went to the shopping center, then you would probably be exposed to it, but you won't necessarily know if another individual within that vicinity has the virus. So that is just common exposure. You went to the mall, you don't really know if a person there has the virus. It could be, it could be not. So you're exposed to it, but you don't really know. If you do not then have any symptoms, then there's no real need to do any test. If you came into direct contact, the direct contact would be, now you know that a person has COVID-19, and you came into direct contact with them. So you interacted with them, or came to very close proximity with them, or you live with them, you work with them. Then you would probably need to have a test done to ensure that you have not contracted the virus.
At what point? Do we do it immediately, or do we wait a day or two?
You probably would want to do it immediately, just to be sure. Because if you do come into direct contact with somebody who has COVID-19, there is a possibility that you have contracted it, because it is a virus that sort of travels through droplets, or coming into direct contact with somebody who has COVID-19, you probably want to get tested.
Okay, so we come to the lab, and as you mentioned earlier, it's either swab test from the throat or the nose.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not a really painful process.
So it's not done. No, so it's not done using blood. So there's no bloods that are drawn through your veins or through your arms into various tubes. It's done using a swab. A swab is basically a big earbud, if you want to put it in simple terms. And it's either put up your nasal cavity or down at the back of your throat. It's a fairly quick process and painless, unless there is some discomfort if it's done through the nose, but orally it's quite there's no real discomfort to the patient.
Okay. And then how soon, so at Hamadi, let's use Hamadi Labs. So how soon can we get our results? So if uh, I came to get tested and the swab is sent through, how quick can we get our results in terms of the whole analysis process?
So we're currently working on a 48-hour turnaround time, between 24 and 48 hours. There's a lot of factors that come into play. It depends on demand, it depends on capacity, it depends on staff. So it's quite a, there's various factors that play a role in terms of turnaround times. But currently working on 24 to 48 hours.
It will take before somebody gets their results. So
their results.
Okay, Jazakallah. This has been a very, very informative segment in terms of, I think I've been educated in terms of the different specialities and areas in terms of analyzing our bodies. Basically, that's what you do in terms of drawing fluids from our body and analyzing it. Just to put it in simple terms, I'm trying to just process and understand this and assimilate the information, as well as the advice that you've given us in terms of COVID and COVID-19 testing. And that, is there anything else that we'd like to add in terms of laboratories, as well as anything relating to the COVID-19 pandemic?
No, I think from my side, we've sort of covered a little bit of detail. I wouldn't say too much of it, but a little bit of detail just to give our listeners a bit of background and understanding. You're welcome to visit our labs. We are based in all 9 provinces. You can visit our website. You can call any of our laboratories. Currently offering.
So what's the website?
It's www.hamadilab.co.za. So it's HAMADILAB.co.za. We are offering, with the COVID-19, we're offering also mobile testing. So if there's any corporates that require testing, we have professional nurses that go out and basically arrange a day or time where we can do the swabbing. And also we're doing we're also doing in the Gauteng area and certain other areas, we've got nurses who are mobile. So they are able to go out and to various houses or residents, or like I said, corporates, to do testing. We have done that on a large level.
So this is fantastic, because so if somebody at the workplace now tests positive, and you as a manager or director of a company, you feel responsible, you'd like all the staff to get tested at work, we contact Hamadi. Go on your website, get your details, we contact the labs, they'll send somebody out, do the test for everybody, and then inform us of the results. And like you say, in the Gauteng area, even you have a mobile unit that would come to the house. Maybe if 4 or 5 family members feel one has been exposed or direct contact, you feel just as a precaution, you'd like everybody in the household to be tested, you'd offer that service. That's actually brilliant, because I think you get so afraid, because especially if you feel you're negative and you're going to go out to a lab, and people there, the chances are whoever's there sitting next to you, they might be positive, and you're actually afraid, and you get nervous that if I'm negative, I might just contract it from somebody here while I'm going for testing. Because that also, all different scenarios play in your mind when things like this happen. So I think this mobile offering at homes as well as a workplace, really, it's a fantastic initiative from Hamadi, and I think it takes away that anxiety and that fear and that apprehensiveness just to go into a laboratory and have the test. Jazakallah so much for coming on air and enlightening us and informing us here on Inspired Afternoons. And I can see the passion in terms of, you're really passionate in terms of what you do, and maybe we wish you all the best, and we wish success for Hamadi in everything, in all the ventures that they do, inshallah.
Jazakallah. Thank you for hosting me, and thank you for the listeners. I think we can always do a follow-up segment, and we can invite some of our various specialists to come and do a session just to educate the listeners. And yeah.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, that actually would be wonderful. I'll get my producer Zakia to contact you, and yeah, we can just isolate the various areas of speciality in terms of the different clinicians you have, and we can discuss that. But Jazakallah so much for joining us here on Salam Media. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That was Muhammad Bholat, laboratories, and I think I've learned something. I've gained, and instead of did you know, now I know, and now my listeners know as well, alhamdulillah. So what we're going to do, we're going to go for a short break, and then we're talking Youth Day, June